Alright guys, welcome to one of my tutorials on FL Studio. My name's Tony and I'm just making a series of tutorials for basically FL Studio for Dummies. No offense if you're watching this. It's not to imply that you're a dummy, but I'm hoping that there are things here that you'll be able to learn. Even if you've been around FL Studio for a while, there may be things that you've learned. Today I want to focus on what is called the step sequencer. That would be this box right here. A step sequencer is where you build your patterns, and patterns are the building blocks, or bricks if you will, that go into making up a song. First thing you'll notice about the step sequencer, most likely, is all these little squares all over it. What do they represent? Well, each square represents, if you're familiar with rhythm or beats at all, 1/16th beat. This is in this particular time signature anyway. And so if we click in these, you know what, let's call them steps since it's a step sequencer. If you click in these steps, you'll see that they light up. They're kind of like buttons. And horizontally, the step sequencer measures time, and vertically, we have listed our different instruments. So right now, it's a drum kit and one synth. When you click in a step, this tells FL Studio that as it plays through this pattern, when it reaches the steps that are lit up, to play this instrument, this sound. So, if we've clicked once every 4, that'll be 4 beats for us, and this is what it sounds like when you press play. I apologize that you know what, I'm going to turn that buffer length down because otherwise it's too laggy. Let's hope that doesn't get distorted. Alright, good, that's better. So yeah, you can see that it plays the instrument on the beats that are lit up. Second thing to notice is that this green light here that my mouse is pointing to represents the instrument or channels that you have currently selected. Right now it's the kick. If I want to switch to something else, I can left click and it will switch to now the snare or the clap or the hat. If you want to select multiple instruments at once, maybe to link them to your mixer or something like that, or to group them, right click. And you can right click and drag if you want, or you could just singularly right click. If you right click again, it will deselect, and so that's how you can tell which instruments you currently have selected. So let's move over here. Always this knob on the right represents your volume. It's the volume for that particular instrument. So if I'm playing the kick and I turn that down, by the way, you don't have to have this selected to be adjusting these knobs. I'm just kind of OCD like that. So while I'm playing the kick, I'll fiddle with these knobs and show you what they do. Alright, my computer is having a fit, so I'm going to turn that buffer length back up. Never mind. So as you heard, the kick got quieter and louder as you adjust this knob, and later on in other tutorials we'll get into how can you get this knob to automatically do that while the song is playing, so you don't have to sit there fiddling doing it. The knob to the left of it is the pan knob, and this basically represents where in the stereo field, be it left or right channel, will the kick come out. Right now it's dead on center. That means the kick is equally coming out in both speakers. Now if I turn it to the right, you'll hear, all the way to the right, you'll hear there's no kick in the left speaker and only kick in the right speaker. And the opposite is true if I turn it to the left. This glowing button to the left of these knobs is basically just your kill switch. It's a mute button. So again, it follows the same principles as these ones. If you left click, it mutes. When it's not lit up, that means no sound will come out of the channel even when it's playing. And a handy trick, if you ever need to hear just what one instrument's doing in a pattern where lots of instruments are playing, for example this one, you just want to hear what the kick is doing, right click and click on solo. That will mute all other channels and you can just hear the kick. I'm sorry, that's still panned over there. The other thing that's great about knobs in FL Studio is that they will snap to the center. So if you're wanting to reset this pan knob and you're worried about getting it exactly on center, if you kind of go slowly, you'll feel that the program will stop it at the center for a little bit, so you can get it dead on, which is handy. Now if you want to, to get back to the muting, you've soloed one and you want to quickly unsolo everything. So turn everything back on. Just right click and untick the solo, and it will turn everything else back on. So back to that other pattern. I want to show you a couple of features now which admittedly you'll probably never use or very rarely use, and they're kind of remnants of older versions of FL Studio. That's kind of why they're kicking around. And we'll do it with the kick, so we'll just put those 4 beats back in, and this keyboard icon in the top right corner of your step sequencer, if you click that, it will bring up a keyboard, and these dark orange notes represent these lit up steps, as you can see. These kind of faint orange one represents what note the kick would be playing if there were steps there, right? Now, what you can use this for, admittedly very limitedly, is changing the notes of any instrument you have. So, for example, right now it's on a C, as you can see. If you click that, that's what it sounds like on a C. If you take it up an octave, it speeds up the sample to play the pitch an octave higher. And you can do that throughout your pattern. If you want to erase one that you have placed, right click and it will disappear. And that's basically it. And again, like I said, it's very limited. I would never use that. The reason I would never use it is not because it doesn't have any function, but because the piano roll, which we'll get to in a later tutorial, is just far more advanced, far more detailed, and you're able to do a lot more with it, have a lot more control. So this is just really sort of limited. But I'll show you, if you click on what looks like a, what is that, a column graph or a bar graph? That's not a bar graph, column graph, I guess. If you click on this, and by default it will be set on velocity, I think, which are the pink lines or the pink bars. Each one of these bars represents the volume of this sample when played on that particular beat. So if I turn this first one very low, you'll hear the kick was low at the beginning. And what this allows for is things like, let me show you with a snare. Let's do it this way. Alright, so this is kind of a snare roll, a very kind of cheesy one right now, but we'll bring that back up, and since this green light is lit up, we know these bars correspond to the snare channel because they are all independent. Each channel, each instrument gets its own set of pink bars. And we want this snare roll to fade in, okay, because it's coming up to a build in a dance song or something. You want it to be kind of fading and getting louder as it progresses. One way you could do this would be to left click, well, one really annoying way would be to left click at each particular note and build it up like that. Another way would be to left click and drag and try to draw it, but even then that's not straight. You might not want it straight, but if you ever do want a straight line, a handy tip, and this works in other parts of FL Studio too, is right click and hold it and then drag, and FL Studio will basically connect all of these lines to be linked in together so you can get a perfectly straight, a linear fade in, and this is what that sounds like. Something like that. If you drag this slider across to the left, you'll get your pan controls, and this is exactly the same as the pan controls here, at least in what it does. It just allows you to vary the pan by each individual note. So the midway point, as you can see, is halfway up the y-axis, and anything above halfway represents the right speaker or the right channel, and anything below represents the left. So you can hear, let me just alternate these snare patterns, these snare hits for you, so you can hear what this sounds like. So obviously you can hear how that would have some use. It's kind of a cumbersome way to do it, but it can work, so that's another control. Now, along this slider there are a variety of other controls. I'll be honest, some of them I don't know what they do just because I never use this feature. So I'll leave those for you to figure out yourself if you want to use those. I think shift has to do with slightly, it's kind of similar to this next feature we'll go over, where it kind of slightly shifts when the notes play, so you could get almost a swing or stutter effect. But right now we'll move on to the next portion, which is the swing bar. As you can see, it says swing there, and the bar is set to 0. I've pasted in 16 little hi-hat hits, and this is what it sounds like with no swing. If we turn the swing bar up to hear its fullest effect, this is what it will sound like. Now, that's kind of ugly at that point when there's that much. It would have limited use. But you can vary it, so halfway. That's kind of more reasonable. But again, these features are kind of hung around for a long time in FL Studio. There are better ways to do those things. If you want to make a swing beat, I would recommend going into the piano roll, which we'll go into in a later tutorial, but if you're wondering, right-click on an instrument and click piano roll. This is the piano roll, which we'll go over in another one. But you just get so much more finesse when you're trying to place notes, rather than relying on a swing bar to just slightly syncopate each one of your beats. Moving along, this is your pattern selector. There are two ways to select patterns, actually maybe more than that, but one way is here. This says we're on pattern 2, and you can drag this up to 999 or all the way down. The other way is to click this down arrow, and you'll see a list of your patterns. Right now there's only one other pattern that we could switch to, so that's all that's... Hold up a moment. Where's my pattern 2 at? Oh, there's nothing in pattern 2, that's why. Let's put something there. So now you see my patterns, and as you build patterns, this list will grow longer. And what you can do here, a variety of things. One would be renaming and recoloring a pattern. So you might just call this kick, press enter when you're done, it will rename this pattern kick. So you can quickly identify, oh, I want my kick, and there it is. So that'll be useful later. It's a good habit that I have not gotten into. I rarely name my patterns, though I should, because it would be much less confusing when I'm building my songs. You can you can delete your patterns, you can clone your patterns. This is a really handy tool. So let's say you're trying to build a drum beat, but you want various versions of the drum beat. So right now it's 4 straight kicks. If you click clone, you now have the pattern called kick number 2. Now, kick, the original, is still there intact, but you've just created a duplicate from which you can add, maybe you want hats to come in at this point. And you can kind of progressively build your patterns that way, which is really handy. Okay, so a couple of other features in this drop-down menu. One is find first empty and find next empty. What these will do is find the next available empty pattern. So instead of you having to sift through, like scroll this up until you see an empty one and then start building a pattern, you could just click one of these and it would instantly find one. You quickly name it and then get to work. Rename and recolor, I showed you. If you want to select a color, you click in this little box and you can select various shades. You won't actually really see that color until later, I don't think. Yeah, I mean, I guess you see it there in the name, but you'll see it when you start placing them in places. Next would be insert one. Oh, sorry, open in project browser. Now this is kind of, again, I think this is kind of held on. I don't know anyone who uses this. I could be wrong, but you click it, and it will. Actually, let's go to a pattern with something in it, like this one. You click open in project browser, and it is supposed to open in project browser. Well, it brings it up over here anyway. You can look at your patterns, and there's this pattern. Oh, and there's a piano roll there, and if you click it, it will take you to the piano roll. I don't really know why you would use that to navigate. Maybe some people would, maybe it is quicker. I never use it. Insert one basically inserts a pattern between others, so instead of finding the next available pattern, it just creates a new one where it is. Clone, I showed you. Delete, self-explanatory. Move up and move down, that just orders the different patterns. And then split by channel is an interesting feature, which will I show you? Let me show you here. So we'll build one with a few different channels being used. So here we have a kick, a hat, and a snare. And if you click split by channel, what it does is takes each channel's role, or what they're playing, and turns that into its individual pattern. So we click it, and suddenly instead of one pattern, now we have 3. So we have kick kick, kick hat, and kick snare. So instead of them all being in the one pattern, they're spread across 3 individual patterns. Well, next, oh, that's another. This little plus button is a quick way to add a pattern, I believe. Let me just check that. Yeah, that's right. Next to this is a little play arrow, self-explanatory. It's just a play pause thing. This next feature is something I only discovered recently. It's kind of useful. By default, since this piano roll that I have on the acid sound goes longer, it actually goes for 4 bars. So here we have the 16 squares represented, which is this length here. But then it's 4 times as long as that. So what FL Studio will normally do is play these first 16 squares all together, where we have the kick and all the instruments in, and then it will play the rest of the pattern, but the drums won't be playing with it because they obviously don't go that long. So that's what it sounds like. Now what you can do is click this button and it will continue to loop the shorter segments of the pattern over these longer ones. It's kind of easier to show you than tell you. There you go. This box here will let you select how many sets of 4 steps you want in your pattern. So right now it's set to the default, which is the same as 4. We have 4 sets of 4 steps. If you want it to be 3, you'll notice the whole step sequence gets shorter. If you want it to be 2, it gets shorter still. 1 is your minimum, and 16, from what I can tell, is your maximum. It won't extend beyond that. Oh wow, I didn't expect it to stretch things out though. Oh, of course it did. Sorry, that was really foolish of me. Of course it would stretch things out. It's basically showing these lengths for what they really are. Each chord is held for 4 beats and then becomes a new chord. So yeah, this again has some limited use. If you want to change time signatures, it can be useful to do things in 6s, for example, rather than 4s, or 3s rather than 4s. And then these arrows are just for grabbing the box and dragging it around, but you can do that anyway. It doesn't have to be on the arrows. This drop-down menu down the bottom will let you select different groups of instruments. So this is probably this is the last feature I'll show you for this tutorial. You can group different instruments. Let's say we want to group the drums, so they're all kind of by themselves and they're not crowded in by the various synths we have. We can clearly see where are our drums, what are they doing. Well, you select them all by right-clicking, like I showed you earlier, and then you go to Channels, Group Selected, or you can press Alt-G as the shortcut. So I will press Alt-G. You type the group name. We'll make this drums, self-explanatory. Press enter, and there you have all the drums by themselves. And what you can do here is sort through different groups that you have. Right now this says unsorted because I haven't sorted the synth into any group. So it's now by itself. These drums are by themselves, even though they're in the same pattern. So it's just for kind of peace of mind of it's how you want to set things up so you can mentally process where your instruments are and you can visually separate them for your ease. So this tutorial's gone long enough anyway. That's basically the step sequencer. We'll get into building songs in a bit, and I'll also go through the piano roll, and I want to go through the mixer with you as well, and then we'll get into how to do some specific sort of effects and sounds. So that's all for now. Thanks for watching.